Members, a quorum is present. A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. The day's prayer will be offered by our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos. Father Papadimos.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, we know that you grant your grace and blessings to those who ask for them in their heart. We know you do this since you confer so many blessings, even on those who do not call upon you. Strengthen our desire, Lord, to pray to you without ceasing, to constantly call upon your name, and to ask for the protection and guidance and grace that you freely give. Amen.
Thank you, Father. We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Bonta as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Bonta.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, March 19th, 2015. The Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Kevin Mullen, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dotson Wilson at the desk.
Mr. Holden moves. Ms. Olson seconds. That the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions, the absences for the day for personal business, Assembly members Jones Sawyer and Rendon. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your procedural motions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 118 and allow Assembly members Alejo, Chu, Cooley, Eduardo Garcia, and Hernandez to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
With that objection, the request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 and allow Assembly members Campos, Chu, Cooper, Lowe, and Patterson to speak on adjourned memories today.
With that objection, the request is granted.
Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer the following bills to committee. Assembly Bill 655, Quirk, from the Transportation Committee to the Agriculture Committee. Assembly Bill 683, Lowe, and Assembly Bill 800, Gomez, from the Elections and Redistricting Committee to the Rules Committee. Assembly Bill 1100, Lowe, from the Public Safety Committee to the Rules Committee. Assembly Bill 1230, Gomez, from the Local Government Committee to the Rules Committee. And Assembly Bill 1247, Irwin, from the Agricultural Committee to the Rules Committee.
With that objection, that request is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. David Chu, you have guests with us today. You are recognized from your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, today I am delighted to welcome a friend, a former elected colleague, and someone who I'm proud to have as my successor as the head of San Francisco's local legislature. There are few elected officials in the state who have had such an inspiring personal story. She has served San Francisco with compassion and strength for her entire life. Please join me in welcoming the President of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, London Breed.
All right, members, moving to business on the daily file. The second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 432, 147, 251, 296, 27, 139, 145, 293, 60 with amendments, and 400 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Moving back to motions and resolutions, Assemblymember Holden, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 63 and Assembly Rule 77 to allow Assembly Bill 91 and Assembly Bill 92, both by the Budget Committee, to be taken up today without reference to file for purposes of concurring in Senate amendments.
Without objection, the request is granted. Assembly third reading. Moving to AB 91, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 91 by the Committee on Budget, an act relating to the state budget and making appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Budget bill.
Dr. Weber, you may open.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, we have very important business on the floor today. As you know, California is in its fourth year of a drought. And this January, we experienced the lowest snowpack and the driest January in recorded history. The purpose of this urgency drought relief package today before us is to provide immediate funding to help communities deal with the devastating dry conditions affecting the state and to increase local water supplies. This package was heard yesterday in the Budget Subcommittee 3. It amends the 2014 budget bill to accelerate many drought-related proposals to the governor's budget aimed at improving the state's water supply and storage through infrastructure investments, improving the management of groundwater, and addressing water quality issues, particularly in disadvantaged communities. This bill also includes additional emergency funding for drinking water supplies for disadvantaged communities, food assistance, conservation education and outreach activities, and urgent fish and stream needs related to the drought. The legislation includes more than $1 billion for local drought relief and infrastructure projects to make the state's water infrastructure more resilient to extreme weather conditions. Specifically, the legislation does the following. It accelerates $267 million from Proposition 1 water bond funding for safe drinking water and water recycling from the governor's January budget proposal. It provides an additional $31 million in new target expenditures that include the following. $17 million in additional funding to support emergency food aid to 29 counties most impacted by the drought. It includes $4 million for emergency drinking water in disadvantaged communities. $5 million to Department of Water Resources to provide emergency drinking water support for small communities. $1.4 million to the Department of Water Resources to increase advertising and public relations related to the Save Our Water campaign. The bill also accelerates $660 million from the governor's January budget proposal of Proposition 1E bond monies for flood protection in urban and rural areas to make the state's infrastructure more resilient to climate change and flood events. This bill obviously will not solve the drought, but it is an important first step this year in our continuing effort to address the urgent needs brought on by the extreme drought. It contains critical funding for emergency water and food services and gets a start on big projects such as water recycling that help provide local water supplies reliability. They can help with the future and our ongoing drought, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Mr. Bloom, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise in support of AB 91. The worst drought in the state's history is more than a drought. It is a water crisis. It's a crisis that is filled with human impacts, and we are called upon to act. Across the state, farmers are fallowing their land. Ranchers are losing their livestock to starvation and dehydration. People employed in the agricultural industry are unemployed and unable to feed their families. Communities are running out of water. Conservation is now essential. This is a water crisis, and we are called upon to act. Scientists at NASA believe that we are headed towards a mega drought, similar to what Australia is currently experiencing, where drought conditions could persist for the next few decades or perhaps even longer. This is a water crisis, and we are called upon to act. The severity of what lies ahead is anyone's guess. However, we cannot dispute that our water supplies are diminishing due to climate change, while at the same time, demand for water increases due to natural population growth. This reality makes striking a balance between our agricultural, environmental, and urban water needs much more complex and requires multiple short and long-term solutions and strategies. The funding in the proposal before you today builds upon last year's successes and the direction that the people of the state of California have given us. And it addresses some of the critical short and long-term drought needs to make our infrastructure more resilient to the weather conditions we should expect to face with more regularity. Certainly, as Ms. Weber just informed us, these proposals will not solve the drought. You won't see any of us on this floor hanging mission accomplished banners, but that would simply be foolish. We all recognize that we have much more work to do, not only now, but in the years ahead. The people of California need to know that our actions will be ongoing, that they will be thoughtful, impactful, and open and transparent. In order to fully meet our water supply challenges, we will need to explore the latest technologies that are being pioneered in places like Ireland and Israel. And we will need to be honest with ourselves and sincerely challenge our long-standing assumptions by rethinking how we landscape, what we grow, and how we grow it, and how we utilize water in our daily lives. While these conversations are for another day, and hopefully another day soon, the proposal before you is a real and significant step forward, and for these reasons, I ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Olson, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I, too, rise in support of AB 91 and am hopeful that we will have wide support today for this emergency drought relief package. As has been said by both of the previous speakers, we are in a drought and we are in a crisis. This drought is not a north versus south, east versus west problem. This is a statewide problem. We have communities in severe drought, even in our areas of origin in the Sierra Nevadas, and we are desperate for solutions. And so I'm pleased to rise in support for this emergency drought relief package today. In the San Joaquin Valley, as of last year, we had already fallowed 428,000 acres of land, put 17,100 people out of work, and those numbers have grown by now. We were traveling down on a water tour a couple of weeks ago, and we talked to people where food bank lines have tripled in the last 2 years due to this drought crisis. People don't have water to take showers in. And it is up to all of us to work together to immediately address the situation. And so we are so pleased to stand in support of this temporary fix to provide relief that is needed now, but we have to demand more immediately. The fact it is way past time to move beyond these temporary Band-Aid fixes. We have to work together to start to expedite projects that will increase long-term supply. And we need action behind that, not talk. We have to move beyond exploring and studying and studying and studying. We have to start building these projects that are going to increase supply and get it to the communities who so desperately need it. And it's important not for just agriculture. This is not just an agricultural problem, as important as that is. It is one of our number one drivers economically in the state of California. We've already had a $2 billion economic loss due to this drought in agriculture. But this moves far beyond ag. In our communities, certainly in my district, we have domestic wells going dry. As I've explained, we have communities who don't have clean water to drink, who don't have water to shower in. And then if we talk about housing, it's a priority of this House this year to address the affordable housing crisis. Those of us who have served in local government know that in order to approve a housing project, you have to be able to certify a 20-year water supply. If we don't start to address this water crisis in California, we're not going to be able to make those certifications, and we're going to exacerbate the housing crisis that we already have. There are so many reasons to expedite real water storage projects, desalination projects, recycling projects, and other innovative projects that are happening across the world right here in California. And yet earlier this week, we already had a bill killed that sought to streamline the regulatory process and expedite projects for storage. That's just unacceptable. We have to work together to move these projects forward. I did want to clarify the source of funding for part of this package because I think there's been some misunderstanding in some communities about the proposition money that we're using. We all understand Prop 1E versus Prop 1, but I think it's important that all Californians understand much of the funding in this drought relief package today is from Prop 1E for flood control projects and other local water projects that was originally passed in 2006. Now, 8 years later, I'm so pleased we're expediting the allocation of those funds to get these projects built. But I certainly hope that for the Prop 1 funds that the voters passed last November for water storage, recycling, groundwater improvements, etc., we can't wait 8 years before we're suddenly expediting the allocation of those funds. We have to do it now. Californians are relying on us as Republicans and Democrats to come together to do this emergency drought relief package, but to immediately get to work on improving and expediting the speed at which we can get all the projects off the ground that will increase water supply that Californians in every community, north, south, east, and west, so desperately need. So please join me in voting yes on AB 91, emergency drought relief, but please also join us in expediting projects that Californians so desperately need.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Mr. Mathis, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise today in support of AB 91 to expedite the funding towards desperately needed emergency drought relief. When we talk about natural disasters, events such as earthquakes, wildfires, floods, and hurricanes easily come to mind. But how many earthquakes, fires, floods, and storms last with devastating intensity, not for minutes, days, or weeks, but for years and years on end? As slow-moving disasters such as drought, which we currently face, it is just as dangerous to our communities as a catastrophic fire, flood, or earthquake. And for the millions and millions of vulnerable families, communities, farmers, workers, and businesses depending on us to apply common sense solutions to this slow-moving disaster, we have to work together. We have to help our communities. This goes across the state. This isn't just small towns. This isn't just the Central Valley members. I represent the small town of Eastside, Porterville. This is my hometown. And in this town, there are over 1,000 residential wells that have gone dry, that have been dry for over a year. We need to move forward. We need to expedite the funding. We need to take care of these families. When parents have to look their children in the eye and go, I'm sorry, you can't take a bath. You can't flush a toilet because we don't have water. What kind of country do we live in? We call ourselves California. We say we're number one. Join with me today, vote yes, and let's be number one and move forward and start taking care of the people we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Mr. Alejo, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to, first of all, thank the Governor, Speaker Atkins, and Senator President Pro Tem De Leon for making the drought relief a priority. The people of our state, without clean and safe drinking water, certainly cannot wait anymore. The Assembly member from Visalia and I have seen the people of East Porterville in his district of Tulare County who are suffering every day without running water in their homes. Most who are Latino and other working poor of California. Hundreds of wells have gone dry for months now, and East Porterville is the ground zero on the adverse impact of this drought. People are losing their livelihoods, watching their children suffer, and some who may lose their homes without immediate state action. You can also see the drought effect in my own district in southern Monterey County. Something that's fundamental as drinking water may be a small piece of this overall drought response, but it should be one of our top highest priorities. I am pleased to say that the drought package provides $4 million for emergency drinking water to disadvantaged communities. These bills begin to take on the problem of contaminated private wells, with $5 million to the Department of Water Resources to provide emergency drinking water to support small communities. And looking to the future, we are creating a first-of-its-kind Office of Sustainable Drinking Water Solutions at the State Water Board. But we have hundreds of thousands of Californians that rely on individual wells, and when wells go dry, there's no other alternative but to haul in water. Families in rental properties may be left out by bureaucratic restriction. We have much work to do, but this is the important step forward because every Californian has a human right to safe and clean drinking water. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to rise in support. There is a bit of an irony, of course, that we're dealing with a bill that's got an awful lot of money for flood control at a time when a little bit more water perhaps would be useful rather than something we have to worry about. Nevertheless, as was very well explained by the Republican floor leader, we know where this money is coming from. These are projects that have been on the drawing board for a long time. They are necessary. They will prove to be beneficial for the state of California in the long run, and the funding is there for them. So it is a worthwhile thing to support, although it doesn't really address the drought problem that we have in the state of California. Many of those projects are spread throughout the state. Some of the money is coming to my district. I like that. Orange County is very much a donor district. It's nice to be able to support a bill that gets some money back for needed infrastructure in my county. And then we come to something that those of us that have been here a while have seen a lot of. Some of the freshmen are perhaps seeing for the first time. There is an addendum, to a memorandum of understanding with ASME that we are being asked to approve in this bill that deals with the response of CDCR to the federal court order relating to the mental health treatment of our prisoners. Question of the author.
With that objection?
What has that got to do with the drought? Question of the author. Why is that provision in this bill? Okay. Then we'll take a response from the speaker. But I'm just pointing out that this is something that happens all too often and shouldn't. Miscellaneous stuff that some of us might think are poison pills, gets thrown into a bill that it doesn't really relate to at the last minute, looking to jam people up. I don't feel jammed up about this. I'm going to vote for this bill because I think it's a good bill in a lot of different reasons. But I would urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as we go forward this year to keep our legislation clean. If you've got something that you don't think is going to get as many votes as you might like for it but is still going to pass, be upfront with it. Put it out there. Let us vote up or down and take the heat in our district or take the credit in our district. But this sort of action, sticking stuff in bills that they don't seem to be related to, at least there was no answer yet as to how it's related to drought. I just want to say, as somebody who's been here a long time, just strikes me as unnecessary, and I urge going forward that this sort of conduct not happen, that the legislation be kept clean, and we be allowed to vote our consciences on any particular piece of legislation and then take the responsibility or the credit for it down in our districts. With that said, and despite that MOU in there, this is a worthy package of relief measures, certainly deserves to be supported, and for what it's worth, I, for one, will be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Madam Speaker, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think enough conversation has been had by members of this body on why this is an important measure for us to support today. I would just, in response to the last speaker's comments, say we are opening up the budget today. There is a process by which you can open up the budget to do certain things during the course of a session. And when we do that, there could be 5 other things there of an emergency nature that needs to be done. In working with the administration, this is one thing that we needed to address at this time. It is in the language. It is there for people to read. It is not hidden. It's part of what's available to the public. It's what is part of having been discussed already. And, this is an opportunity for us to do things throughout the year as we need to, as is required. And so, I would just say for my colleagues, this has been pretty much out there and in the language of what we are dealing with today. And fortunately, we only have a couple of things we need to deal with, and we will pick up all of the other things as we move into the budget process in June. And so as it relates to this particular bill today, I, like my colleagues who have stood before me, urge your support for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Cooley, you are recognized.
Colleagues, I just wanted to rise in support of this bill, and I'm very grateful for the leadership on the 2 sides, our policy chairs, our fiscal chairs, who have worked to put this together. And as we prepare later today to take a break, I think it's a milestone that we bring this bill to the floor today to move the state forward. And I would just make really the institutional observation that there are no 80 individuals in the state of California that stand in the relationship to the future of this state as we do on this floor. And so the signal thing here, this is water policy, but it's also how we function as an institution, how we collaborate on the institution, how we address matters and put things behind us so we can move on to the next item in the queue. And so I am just pleased and honored to rise here in support of this and to hear the comments from my colleagues. I think it augurs well for this session and for the future of this great state of California. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Seeing and hearing no further business, Dr. Weber, you may close.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I thank you for your comments. As pointed out, this is an urgent matter. We're reopening, obviously, and amending the past budget of 2014. And a part of that amendment, obviously, is a drought. A significant part of it. And so I request your aye vote on this matter of AB 91.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote.